Welcome to resume preparation, and this is the second video in the series about resume preparation, and in this video we are going to cover the organization of resume documents. My name is Dr. Chadwick Royal. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Counselor Education at North Carolina Central University. Our department is one of 9 programs in the United States that carries CACREP accreditation for a career counseling program. I want to go back over just a few things from the very first video in this series. The first thing is that I encourage you to use a template when you create a resume. It's the sample that you see right here. All those boxes that you see disappear once you print the document, and they help to keep things nice and neat, orderly, and in alignment as you are working and editing your documents. Also, if you need to go back and modify it as needed, it makes it a lot easier to modify certain elements. I also have highly recommended that you include only factual information in a resume document. Do not fabricate anything. That will be a certain reason to either miss out on an opportunity or to lose a job you already have. It's also essential that you have an error-free resume. Simple spelling or grammatical errors can cause you to no longer be considered for a job you may want. What we do want to cover in this particular video and spend some time looking at are the common elements and the typical organization of those elements in a resume. Now, here's a sample list of what I recommend and the order in which I recommend that you present the information. Contact information, professional definition, go to education, then licensure and certifications, honors and awards, work experience, core skills or competencies, and then field-specific or trade-specific skills. And let's look at these in a little more detail. Contact information is relatively straightforward. You have your name, you have an address to which you would receive work-related correspondence, telephone number, doesn't really matter if it's a mobile number or a landline, and then a professional looking email address. There's also a professional definition, and this something I've well, to be honest with you, I've given that name, and it's really more of a personal catchphrase, a tagline for your branding, so to speak. And you see what you see here for this individual is that they classify themselves as an inexperienced construction project manager, a practical, creative, and effective problem solver. Now, this individual for this particular resume was applying for a position as a construction project manager, so it makes a lot of sense to give themselves this definition, and it was related to past experiences that this individual had. The practical, creative, and effective problem solving element, well, that's really more related to keywords, and I'm going to talk in greater depth about keywords in the third video of this series. For now, we'll just say this is how this individual wanted to describe themselves. You also will look at education, what comes next. Now, it is presented in a little bit of a different order on this sample, and I am displaying it this way just to let you understand that it's okay to have it organized a little bit differently. However, we do need to understand that the typical organization is where you see education closer to the top. Now, some of the elements you would present in here: the institution to which you graduated from, the location of the institution, your degree or diploma, your major, your minor, and dates of attendance. You might also decide to include GPA or maybe even a major GPA, but I would just suggest that the longer you're out of school, the less important, the less relevant that is to include on your resume. There's also licensure and certifications, as well as honors and awards, and those would typically come after education. You see a couple of samples here with professional recognition as well as professional licensure. If you don't have honors and awards, you don't have licensure or certifications, obviously you wouldn't put anything there. Next comes work experience, and that really contains the bulk of content for your resume. I did go into some detail about that in the first video in this series. And just to reiterate, strongly recommend you use action-oriented words in this element of your resume. And just refer back to that first video to hear about the phrasing of elements, terminology in which you might want to use present tense, past tense, and the mirroring of that phrasing. Next, you might decide to include core skills, core competencies. What you see with this individual is that it was closer to the top, and again this comes back to the use of keywords. And as we were drafting this resume, we wanted to highlight specific things based on the advertisement to which this individual was responding to. And it really is heavy in specific keywords that were related to his past experiences, as well as keywords for a given position. You also might decide to include field-specific or even trade-specific skills. This really depends on what your background is and what you're applying for, but what you see are some samples here of specific trade skills to which it was important that this individual demonstrated. You also see lots of specific trade skills with IT jobs as well. You might have to indicate specific technologies to which you're proficient, and it's important to include those. Now, the phrase references available upon request, usually stuck at the very end of a resume. This is not necessary. It's pretty much understood that you will either have or will need references, and that they will be contacted if needed. So it's not necessary to include this phrase that they're available. And you also do not have to list the references unless specifically requested in the job advertisement or by the employer. You might also notice and ask yourself, well, what happened to the career objective segment that usually was presented immediately after that identifying information? And that really is a little bit more of a trend. What we're seeing with resume writing is that the career objective, that term, and the concept of kind of stating what it is that you want is on its way out. What I would suggest is that this professional definition kind of takes the place of it. In some ways it has a dual purpose. It indicates a little bit of what you're seeking, but it also indicates who you are. It provides a little bit more of a professional identity than it does this is what I want out of a given resume. So like the career objective used to be changed with each job you sought, your professional definition might also be changed with each resume you send out. Which brings us to the next point I wanted to make, and this was that different versions might be organized differently. The sample that I showed you is a good example of that, in which resumes are organized differently, and it's okay. You might not want to steer too far away from the typical organization, but this is really more just personal preference. I think that I have drafted plenty of resumes that have had a atypical arrangement. But the organization, when you get right down to it, the organization should reflect the position in which you are seeking. Now, job advertisement would be a good indicator of how this document might and should be organized. So I've taken the liberty of securing a a job advertisement that I found online, and I specifically pulled the job requirements that were listed. And what we see here at the very top, what they are wanting out of a prospective employee, or to see out of this interviewee, is initially their education and training, that they have the appropriate degree, which in this case is a BA or BS in computer science or a computer related field. So what this would tell me as a resume writer, that education section should be right at the top, right under identifying information and right under that professional definition. I would want that to be indicated first. You also see under that, the next bulleted point here, a minimum of 5 years related experience with strong knowledge of enterprise application of Apple technologies and their counterparts. Must have at least 5 years progressive OS X or iOS enterprise administration experience. So what that tells me is that either the next section should be my work experience, in which I have those elements, or core competencies, trade skills, those types of things, in which I articulate my proficiency in those elements that are requested. You don't want the prospective resume reader to have to flip back and forth in your resume to make sure that you're satisfying requirements in which they have posted. You want them to be able to look at their requirements list and then immediately look over to your resume and say, yes, this person has this element, check. Yes, this person has this element, check. And just go down the list, so that it really provides an argument for why you might be the perfect fit for that given job. Now again, please edit, please rearrange, change, and update that resume as much as you need it, but please, no less than every 6 months.